Like, this shit did not make sense, and they didn't give a fuck. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing another Flap and Beat. As you can tell by the title, coming with you with another terrible movie. And today's movie is horrendous. Like, it's so bad that it took me 3 days just to compile the notes for the movie because it's just nonsense. But let's just jump right into the nonsense. If you see me look down a lot, it's honestly because this movie was just so fucking long. Like, there's just so many details and somehow they're all fucking necessary. I don't know. So the movie starts with this scene of a loving family and they're making breakfast and we see them drop off the kids to school. We see the mom drop off the kids to school. Mary, that's the main character of this movie. And then we see her get ready for her day. And then we see her have a meeting with her publisher because Mary is this famous author and she wrote this really like best-selling book series. They don't tell you what the series is about, but she wrote this best-selling book series. So the publisher, the people from the publishing company are like, hey, we're offering you this deal. We really want you to write another book because the company isn't doing too well and it would really help if you wrote another book. And Mary's like, no, I don't really like who I become when I write, so I don't want to write another book. They give her a paper with like the offer on it. She doesn't even look at it. She just says, no, I don't want to. So at dinner that night, Tom, the husband, picks up, he sees the offer letter that Mary didn't even look at. That is way too yellow. And he's like, and it's for $2 million. That's the advance for the book. And he's like, oh my God, you have to take this. And she's like, I don't want to take it. I don't like who I become when I write. She says this multiple times. So you clearly know that this is important. But she doesn't like who she becomes when she writes. Blase, blase, blase. Later on that night, we find out that basically Tom lost a whole bunch of money in a risky investment. It lost like half the estate or something. I don't really understand the terms they use because I don't have those kind of funds to lose that much money. But he lost a bunch of money. And so basically Mary has to write the book because they lost a bunch of money. He did this 6 months ago though, and he's just now telling her. So like, if the book deal never came about, when were you gonna tell her that you lost half of the money? And we don't know what he does. So presumably she makes most of the money. When were you gonna tell her? Anyway, so now I guess the next day we see her talking to her friend, Elaine. By the way, we don't know her name for the entire movie. She's the only black character, which is fine, you know, but we don't know her name till the end of the movie. And they don't even do that ridiculous movie trope thing where they're like, Brad, oh my God, I can't believe it's been 5 years since I saw you at school. You know, when we went to school together, and when your dad died and you had to drop out. You know that ridiculous movie thing that they do where they introduce two characters in like 3 sentences in the first 5 minutes of the movie? We never know her name till the end of the movie. Her name's Elaine. She's talking to her friend Elaine and she's telling her the whole situation, and Elaine's like, I think you should do it. And she's like, I don't know, you know, with the kids and everything, it's a lot of work. Plus, I don't like who I am when I write. Oh my God. She says this so much throughout the movie that it literally makes me hate her. Like, okay, we get it. We fucking get it. You don't like who you are when you write. Like, we get it. You're a different person. And she says it the same way with no description. Like, she just keeps saying that but doesn't even say what she's like when she writes. That's why it's annoying. Like, why don't you like who you are when you write? Is it because you don't pay attention to your kids, or because you get into a zone and you just, like, what is it that you don't like? You just keep saying that. It's annoying. And I get it's supposed to set the tone for the movie, and that's what we're supposed, but like, it's just not realistic. And if you're gonna keep saying it, we just need a little bit more, personally. Then Elaine recommends a nanny service to her, and Mary's like, I don't know, da-da-da. And she sets down the business card that Elaine gives her, because they're in a bathroom, because they were at the gym together. They're in like the bathroom together after taking a shower. And she sets it down and she's like, I don't think so. But then she goes to the nanny place, and the person like walks her through, and she's like, sure. So then we have this whole montage scene of bad interviews, which honestly, some of the interviews were not that bad. Like, some of the people who were interviewing for the position were not that bad.
Oh my god, I love your house. It has the best lighting ever. It's great for photos. So thankful for this opportunity to be here, because I love kids, and I'm just so excited to share the word of God with your little lambs.
And I'm also a princess entertainer. Okay. I actually have my tail in the car.
Like, I think it was supposed to be like funny, like, oh my god, they're so kooky and weird. But like, some of them, I don't, I'm like, okay, I guess she's a little weird, but like, I don't see why you wouldn't want her to work with your kid, personally. Like, she's not terrible. I don't know, me personally. Oh, something that bothered me, just like a little nitpicky thing, is that the person who like runs the company or whatever, she was like, yeah, everybody here goes to Ivy League schools. How the fuck are they a nanny then? You can't be in college and be a nanny. Like, being a nanny is a full-time job. That is a full, like, 7 a.m. to like 8 p.m. job. You cannot be in school, in college, and be a nanny. That didn't make sense to me. I feel like, I felt like this for almost the entirety of the movie, but I just feel like the writer for this movie, the writers just said anything that they felt like looked good. Like, this shit did not make sense, and they didn't give a fuck. So in walks Grace, and she annoys me immediately off this first scene. So she comes in for her interview. She's riding a bike in a fucking skirt. But Mary's like, oh, I've had such a long day. I'm gonna go make some tea, sit, wait. Mary and Grace pulls out a fucking book. Yeah, first of all, Mary's like watching her as she makes her tea, and she's like, oh my God. Basically in awe of the fact that she's reading a book. And I'm like, first of all, Mary, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you deserve to get scammed, because you should have known you were getting, like, who reads a book while they're waiting to get interviewed? Nobody does this. That is definitely someone who knew that you were an author. This is someone who did their research on you. Who does that? Who does that? If you're waiting to get interviewed, you sit there and you just look around. You don't do nothing. I would never pull out a book. I don't care what I'm interviewing for. I don't care if I'm interviewing for a librarian position. I would not pull out a book. I'm sorry. It's just awkward. I don't even think I would look at the magazine next to me. I don't know. Like, you just feel like when you're sitting there waiting, you just feel like you can't do anything. So to me, it's extremely unrealistic that somebody would pull out a book. But she did. So then when Mary brings the tea over, they get into a whole conversation about the book, so they basically don't even have an interview. And before they can actually get into the interview, Mary then has to go take a phone call. And when Mary goes to take a phone call, the kids come in, and Grace rushes over and she's like, shh, your mom's taking a phone call. And the kids are like, Mom, because they're scared that this woman is in their house, and naturally. So then when Mary walks back in the room, Grace is holding up one of the kids' pictures that they made in art class or something, and she's telling some story about the picture. The scene is just like, I guess it was supposed to be like, oh yeah, the kids fell in love with Grace immediately. That's what it's supposed to give us, but for some reason, like, it's not for some reason, they just didn't do it correctly, and it just isn't, it just falls very flat. Like, you're just made to feel too quickly like you're supposed to love Grace, and you don't. You just really don't. And you're like, I know that you're trying to make me like her, but you're not giving me any reason to like her yet. And also, she has this really overdone innocence about her that's, it's too much. Like, the way she dresses, the way she talks, her mannerisms, all of that, it's supposed to be like, yeah, I'm so innocent, and it's weird. It's very, 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 very creepy. It's a lot. It's very creepy, and it makes what happens in the movie even creepier, to be honest, to me. Mary's having writer's block, so she starts hanging out with her nanny, naturally. Her nanny, who's supposed to be in college, you know, and Grace is an adult. That's not weird at all. But she does, which leads to this scene where Mary takes Grace shopping, and she takes her to try on bras. Again, that's not weird. That's totally normal to take your nanny bra shopping, your young nanny bra shopping. And they're in the changing room together, and like Mary's literally helping her put bras on. And at one point, Grace literally guides her to cup her boob. None of this even makes sense. This is where things start to really get weird, because now Mary starts having all these sexual fantasies about Grace, and which may or may not be real. I definitely don't think they're definitely not real, but Mary thinks they're real. So by now, Mary's felt inspired, and she starts writing her book, and there's a whole bunch of scenes of her writing. I know everyone has their own method, but as someone who writes themselves, I cannot imagine, first of all, writing on printer paper with no lines. But she writes on printer paper, and then having to transfer it to a computer when you're finished. I would never. That sounds like hell to me. And do you know how many things could happen to a piece of paper? Like, something could happen to your computer, yes. But there are so many more things that could happen to a piece of paper. I would never trust my most precious pieces of work to a piece of paper. Anyway. So one day, Grace, like, the husband Tom asks Grace if she wants to get something to eat after they drop the kids off. And I only noticed this after rewatching it so I could do my notes, that they literally had this conversation right outside of Mary's office. So it's highly possible that Mary heard this, which could have led to what happened in one of the later scenes. So they go out to eat. And Elaine sees them when they're out to lunch. Oh, Elaine doesn't see them when they're out to lunch. Elaine sees them when they're in the car together dropping the kids off, which makes it even more weird that she's suspicious of the fact that she saw them together, because it would have been perfectly normal for them to be together at this point, dropping the kids off at the school. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. She literally saw them together outside of the school. There's nothing wrong with that. Do they both need to drop the kids off at school? No. But that's not the most suspicious thing I would have ever seen in my life. But she's immediately suspicious because she saw them together. But then after the lunch scene, there's a scene of them jamming out to music in the car together, but it's dark outside. Where are the kids? Who picked the kids up from school? Because Mary's not picking the kids up from school. Mary is working on her book. That's the whole reason she has a nanny, so that she can't be bothered with the kids. Who picked the kids up? Why were you guys out to lunch so long? Where are the kids? Where are the kids? You see what I mean when I say that the writers just put shit in here that they thought looked good? I feel like this was a fanfic. I feel like this had to be a fanfic. This is my conclusion that I'm now suddenly reaching, is that this was a fan fiction. Because I feel like they just threw together scenes that they felt like would look good. Like this, as I'm like thinking about it, this was accumulation of scenes that they felt like would look good. This didn't even make sense. Like, they just wanted the car scene in there because there was no reason for it. Where are the kids? By now, Mary has finished her book. She's finished her book, and she and Grace decide to go out to a picnic. And on this picnic, Mary starts reading to Grace, and then we see Grace start sensually touching her leg, and then they start kissing. For a second, let's say that I don't know if this is real or not. This isn't as easy to determine if this is real. The other two scenes, like there was a scene where Grace with Mary, if you know what I mean, in the bathtub. And that, I definitely feel like that was Mary's imagination. Like that was almost very distinctly clear that Mary imagined that. This one is not clear at all. I think that we're left to believe it is real. Maybe. If it is real, it's very weird because it's just like, Mary is an adult. She's presumably older, probably in like her late 30s. She's kind of preying on this young woman, and it's very weird. Like Grace she's in college, right? So she's probably, she seems a lot younger, so she's probably like 18 to 20. I definitely wouldn't say more than like 21. So it is very, very weird that Grace is doing anything with this woman. Like, and I think it's kind of like brushed over just because of the fact that they're both women, but it's very, very weird. Like the age difference is weird. Like, ugh. It's weird. It's very weird. I just wanted to note on that. Like, it's just very weird. It's just weird. I just want to think about it. Anyway, when the picnic is over, they get back and they find out the tires have been slashed, so they have to walk back home. And when they get back home, Elena's there, and Mary's like, why are you here? And she's like, I needed to talk to Tom. Why, if you were suspicious of Tom doing something with Grace, you wouldn't talk to your friend first? Because Mary is your friend, and Tom is your friend because of your relationship with Mary. Sorry, if you're my homegirl, you need to come talk to me first, and not my man. You need to talk to me. But then she has this whole thing about, oh, are you and Tom having sex? Because if he's not getting it from you, dramatic look at Grace, he's getting it from somewhere else. So then they all go inside, and Mary starts helping Grace cook. She's making avocado. She's making guacamole or something like that. And which then leads somehow to Grace eating Mary out. And when the rest of the family comes back inside, Mary's like, oh, I don't feel well. And she goes to lay down. And when she wakes up, she supposedly sees Tom eating Grace out in her dress, in Mary's dress, that she was supposed to wear for her anniversary. I know. So then she confronts them about it at dinner, at the dinner table with her kids. And they're all like, oh my God, like, no. Like, and her kids are like, Mom, you're scaring us. And she's like, I know, baby, I'm so sorry. You know how Mommy is when she writes. Sometimes she sees things and she can't tell if they're real or not. And I think this is like an hour into the movie. And I guess this is when I finally realized that this is, I guess, supposed to be the whole plot of the movie. Because at the whole point, you're like, is this about an affair? We're not sure. I guess this is supposed to be the plot. A whole hour in, dumbass movie. Anyway, the next day, Grace calls the nanny agency and she's like, hey, I noticed you guys didn't cash my check. I'm not calling nobody if they don't cash my check. Excuse me, that's none of my business. It's in the Lord's hands. But anyways, they're like, oh yeah, we've been meaning to call you. You can't cash your check because we need to know which nanny you picked. Here's my problem with this. Also, I don't know how nanny services work, but I'm assuming if I have to pick somebody, I would have to call you to let you know who I picked. And also, you would need to call me. So there's an error on both ends. Why didn't Mary be like, yes, Mary needs to tell Grace, I want you. But why did she also not call the agency herself to be like, I picked Grace, when she told Grace, I want her? So that's an error on her part. And also, I don't understand how the nanny agency forgot to call her, because that's literally your job. It's very unprofessional. But I don't understand how it's not protocol for Mary to call the nanny agency and be like, I want Grace. Like, I don't understand how Grace can just show up and not kind of, like, a contract wasn't signed. Like, that just sounds very, to me. It's very sus. Very sus to me. But, you know, what do I know? I don't run a nanny agency. So, I'm gonna have to do something else, because I'm gonna get eyeshadow in my eye. And the nanny agency's like, we don't have anybody here by the name of Grace. I guess Grace doesn't work for the company. This is when we find out Grace doesn't work for the company. Surprise, surprise. Who didn't see that coming for that fake ass reading the book during the interview? So then, Mary goes to talk to her friend Elaine, who's dead. She's been stabbed in the neck with the scissors. And Mary is the main suspect, because there's a videotape, there's security footage of somebody walking out of Elaine's office at 1 in the morning with a trench coat that Mary has and a scarf covering her head. And you can't see who the person's face is, but Mary has that same trench coat, so she's the #1 suspect. Oh, but also, Mary's book, I guess, outlines the same type, like, it's not exact, but it kind of matches the murder. And also there was a piece of paper in Mary's office, not Mary, Elaine's office, that says something about how, like, alludes to the fact that Mary may have, memory loss and time gaps, time loss and out-of-body experiences or something like that. It doesn't say that she does, but it has that information, that it has her name below it. And then Mary says that no, it's not about her, because you can't say that it's about her. Tom and Mary are talking out in the hallway about the situation, and Tom is like, where were you? Because you were gone for 3 hours last night. During that time, they show this earlier in the movie, Mary had gone out of bed because she couldn't sleep or something, and she had seen that the light was on in her writing room, and that because I told you she writes on papers, it was displaced a little bit, like I think it was open or something, or something was about it was different than how she left it, and the light was on in the room, and she noticed that something was different about how she left her stack of papers, and then she went back to bed. But Tom said, you were gone for 3 hours, so where were you? And then he mentions how the police had found a Swiss Army knife in the garage, and it matched the slash marks, the markings, damn, on the slash bike tires, you remember, from the bike ride from the picnic. First of all, what does that even have to do with this investigation? That has nothing to do with Elaine's murder. Second of all, the police has found a whole lot of evidence in a couple of hours. Literally a couple of hours. We have to assume this is a couple of hours, because it's still daytime. And what's her face? Mary's still wearing the same clothes. They found a lot of evidence. The security tape, the note, the book, the page from her book. Like, they had time to go through all them papers in her book. Is Spencer Reed on this detective team? Like, and the Swiss Army knife, and get fingerprints back from, because there was a scissors. They already tested the fingerprints on the scissors in her neck and said that her fingerprints were on the scissors. They did all that in a couple of hours? Yo, this detective team, they need to get, whoever's on that team, they need to get that in all the police teams across this nation, because they work fast. They did a lot of work. These writers don't even do no type of research, no nothing. Anyway, so then Elaine, somehow, even though she's the main suspect, gets to leave the police station. They mention that there's not enough evidence to arrest her, which is fair that she would get to leave, but she didn't get to leave that soon, baby, because police officers can hold you without arresting you for a certain amount of time. So how'd you get to leave? Because that don't make no sense to me, personally. But she gets to leave, and she takes a drive to visit Grace's family, and she meets her aunt, who clearly has DID. And this is also where her aunt makes a comment about how last she heard Grace was working in some bougie fitness center. And this is where we find out that Grace overheard the conversation between Elaine and Mary, picked up the business card, interviewed, didn't get accepted, stole information from just the top file off the interviewer's desk, and then eventually scammed her way into Mary's life. Wow, who saw that coming? So, I haven't worn highlighter in so long, and it's giving. It's definitely giving. Actually, 2 scenes of Mary leaving the interviewer's office after she got denied.
Unfortunately, we just aren't taking on any new caregivers at the moment. We'll be sure to keep you in mind for the future, though.
I really need this job. What is it? I'm not fancy enough? Didn't go to the right schools? I am overqualified compared to those brats.
I'm sure you'll find a nice family who needs your help. Plenty of them exist.
Bitch.
We'll be sure to keep you in mind for the future, though.
Thank you for seeing me so soon. I really appreciate it. And if you need help with anything at all around the office, cleaning, whatever,
You're at the top of my list.
And I guess it's supposed to be proof of her having DID, or just like, you know, leading up to, you know, the big reveal of DID. Or, but like, it doesn't make sense. Again, the writers did not do any research before writing this script. Because how would that logically happen? Like, how would those 2 different scenes happen? How would both of her alters get to have that experience with the interviewer? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I get that it's supposed to be entertaining for us, but like, it physically would, it just wouldn't, it's not possible. Okay, so now we're back to the present. As Mary's driving back from the aunt's house, she calls Tom and she leaves a voicemail, and she's like, don't let Grace into the house. I have reason to believe that she's dangerous. Why? Because she has DID? Maybe? You don't even know that she has DID. You just know that the aunt has DID. And you know that Grace had a bad situation because she was abused as a child. That doesn't make her dangerous. That's very discriminatory. I don't like that. I really don't like that. I don't like that. We don't even have evidence that she's the one who killed Elaine. So you made that statement off of what? Anyway, then we see Tom get into the shower, and Grace walks in. She's wearing the same trench coat from that security footage and some lingerie, and she's holding a knife. And Tom's like, I don't want to play these games with you anymore. And then we find out that they were having an affair. So maybe that scene from the kitchen was real. You know, the scene where Tom was, you know, having some fun with Grace. Who knows? So then Grace ends up carving the mess out of Tom's stomach and then runs out of the bathroom. So then Mary runs into the house because she just pulled up and sees Tom, and then Grace comes back into the bathroom and she's stressed and she's trying to clean the blood up. And Mary's like, call 911. And, you know, she calls 911 and she's trying to clean the blood up, and she's like, I tried to stop her. And Mary's like, who did you try to stop? And this leads to the identification of Grace's altar, which is the funniest scene in the entire, the best scene in this movie. The best scene in this movie.
Grace, who did this? I tried to stop her. I told her you were nice people and you could help us. You tried to stop who?
Me, you cunt.
Margaret.
Kill her, bitch.
I have to say, watching this terrible movie just to get to this scene was worth it, because I laughed for about 5 minutes. for 5 minutes straight. I paused the movie and replayed the scene 3 times. It was worth it, just for the scene. I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, Tom doesn't die. Grace ends up in a mental hospital. Mary comes to visit her, and the movie ends up with Mary walking out of the mental hospital wearing the same trench coat and scarf combo from that security footage, which leaves us with, did Mary kill Elaine? Or maybe Grace is escaping from the mental hospital. Who knows? And that's it. That's the movie. What the f was this movie about? Like, was it about an author bringing her book to life? Was it about DID? And if it was about an author bringing her book to life, how the fuck did she know that Grace was gonna come into her life? Or, I mean, to be fair, after Grace came into her life, she did not start writing until Grace came into her life. That's fair. But, like, she didn't know that Grace was gonna have multiple personality disorder, and she finished, not multiple personality disorder, forgive me, DID, it's not called multiple personality disorder anymore. But she wouldn't have known about Grace's mental health. And she didn't know that before she finished the book. And the way that DID is depicted in this movie is horrific. Like, actually horrific. I don't know that much about DID. I'm not gonna sit here in front, but I did try and do some research on whether or not people with DID, their voices actually change when they have different alters. I couldn't find that much information on it. I did read that in their head the voices are very distinct and different, but it's not typically that different when, like, their different alters are actually presenting themselves. It might change, like, if the alter is a child, it might sound more childlike, or it might have a little bit more bass if it's a man or something. Like, but it's not insanely different. Like, it's not like a huge difference like they made it out to be, like with the aunt's character. But like for Grace's character, her alter was Margaret. They literally gave it auto-tune. Yeah, besides that, the depiction was, but I honestly, I can't even knock just this movie for that, because every single movie that has a character with DID does this. They make them out to be terrible, and they're almost always killers. Like, almost. They're almost always bad people. Like, where I don't think I've never seen a movie with someone with DID and they're just regular people. Like, it's just a character and they just have DID. But I mean, that goes for most anything in the mental health world. Like, we're never just gonna have a character who's bipolar and is just bipolar. They're always bipolar and a bad person. So yes, this movie was terrible. The writers didn't do any research at all, like none at all, before they wrote this movie. Like none, not a lick, none. And I took personal offense to that. Like, personal offense to that. This movie was terrible, and it took so long to get to the point. Like, almost the entirety of this plot was in the last 30 minutes. The last 30 minutes. This movie was 2 hours long. The majority of the plot was in the last 30 to 45 minutes. The rest of it was just almost nonsensical details. Like, all of it, it was terrible. That's all I have to say. Anyway, I'm getting drawn out because I just feel like a waste of my time. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you aren't already, because I will keep doing more of these. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you guys enjoyed too. And until next time, spread love, be kind. Bye, guys. Just noticed I didn't put lashes on.